This is not a video I intended or planned or anticipated making, but I think that there's probably a lot of people out there like me. I think a lot of people, probably millions of people, are feeling the way that I'm currently feeling, which is disappointed, overwhelmed, frustrated. I feel a bit like I'm grieving something. It's that same bout of calm numbness broken up by just weeping. Like, I have no control over it. Sometimes I'm just bursting into tears. I think there's a lot of people out there that are feeling like that today and will be feeling like that for a while. And I think a lot of us are going to be reaching out for some escapism. We're going to be looking for ways to lighten the load of the overwhelm that is now sitting on our shoulders at the thought of everything that needs to be done now. And I wanted to offer this because I think that the ways that I am processing everything, the things that I am reaching for as my escapism, as my coping mechanism, I don't think are things that I would have thought. I don't think they're things that are traditionally thought of as escapism in a situation like this, but I wanted to offer it because I think there's a lot of ways to process and cope, and I think one of the most important things right now is going to be connection, and I hope that this gives you some thought on ways that you can process everything you're feeling, and I hope that this allows for some connection building, for us to connect and grieve together and move forward together. So the reason that I feel like the ways I'm processing things are a little bit different is that I think traditionally we think of escapism as something that's kind of light and fluffy, and it's something that takes us fully away from what's happening, whatever the thing is that is causing us that distress. And obviously the thing now is quite broad, large scale, and but I found that, like, right before I was reading Finlay Donovan, which is kind of a fluffy, light, silly mystery, and I couldn't bring myself to read it because I think for me that, like, light fluffiness of like romance or something that's kind of silly or cozy just feels too stark to the reality that I'm facing now every day when I wake up. And so I am finding myself reaching for things that are darker, they're more complex, they're in some cases grimdark, thinking about things that are facing that horror face on. And I think that there's kind of two reasons for that, and I will jump to the books that I actually want to mention real quick. None of these are things I've read. These are things I'm planning to read in the next couple of days as I'm processing everything. But I think there's kind of two reasons that those things appeal to me, and the first one is that I think that having something that's more complex, something I really have to pay attention to, kind of dig my teeth into, is better for keeping my brain distracted. I need something that's going to consume all of my attention and require that effort from me to read it and understand it, so that there's not space around the edges for my brain to start panicking and thinking about other things, and to focus on that kind of, at this point, unbearable load that is now on our shoulders. So I think that's part of it, but I also think the other piece of it is that there's an element of reading things about people in dark places, about reading about good or messy people trying to deal with a sudden change in their world. I think that that's so much closer to the reality we're facing now, that reading something that's kind of dealing with those ideas or showing me people moving forward in those conditions is going to give me more space to process the actual emotions I'm feeling and give me new ways to think about them and feel those feelings and analyze them and kind of just deal with them in a variety of ways. And I think that's going to allow me to more effectively process what I'm feeling and find a way forward from there. So the first thing that immediately jumped to mind that I wanted to read was one that just enter my library, a book that's new on my shelf, which is Henry V by Dan Jones. This is a history, obviously. He was a real guy. But Henry V is a king of England who came into power on the heels of the Black Plague. And I'm interested to read this because of that perspective that I think it will give me, that like historically bad things have happened and you can come out of them. I think we've seen that historically, that like really horrible things happen at a large scale. You can still come out of them. There is still hope that good will come of things. But also, this is a complex figure that I know nothing about, so that's going to give my brain that thing to kind of latch onto and chew on and not have time to think about being stressed and angry and overwhelmed and sad. So this was the first thing that kind of popped to mind for me because it has those two elements to it, and I'd read like the first few pages when it arrived, and I'm really interested. It's got an interesting writing style. It's written in the first, or not in first person, I keep trying to say that. It's written in present tense. So I think it's an interesting choice for history, and I feel like this is probably the first thing I'm going to read. But the other thing that came to mind for me as something that I want to read right now to process everything I'm feeling is Before They Are Hanged by Joe Abercrombie. And I know this is grimdark. This is messy people, and sometimes not very good people, being thrust into this like changing world where things are going horribly wrong. Their world is going to war. There are dark machinations happening in the background, and I know this is grimdark. I know that there's probably not going to be like a happy ending. There might be a like stable ending for some characters, but it isn't necessarily going to be happy. And I think I just need to process the idea that that is an outcome, that is something that can happen, but I also want to see these characters grapple with that situation and with their changing world and deal with things suddenly not being the way that they have been. And you know, I think it's going to be cathartic in a way and also help to give me a little perspective. And again, it's complicated. It's a like pretty dense series, and there's a lot going on. There's a lot of characters. There's a lot to think about. So it's not going to give my brain kind of that space. But I feel like kind of facing that grimdark feeling head on is going to be helpful to me in processing. And then those were the two that I thought of. And then my friend gave me some other recommendations of things that she thinks will also have that same kind of depth and the same themes that I'm wanting to engage with at this point. So she recommended The Silmarillion, which I know is a lot of like horrible things going wrong in the world and people just continuing to move forward anyway, for better or for worse. And that was the way that she sold it to me, and again, also very complex. It's written more like a history or like medieval history or something like that. It's got that like denser feel to it, and there's a lot of like, I don't want to say dry detail, but like that's what history books usually make me think of. There's a lot of complexity, but yeah, it's about people in a situation where everything is bad, finding ways to move forward anyway, again, for better or for worse. And probably a lot of this is going to be painful and sad. And as she pointed out, a lot of Tolkien's writing is him grappling with the things he experienced during the World War. I think it was World War One. And I feel like that, like somebody else grappling with the dark event of their own day is probably what I need right now. And the last one she had recommended was Guards by Terry Pratchett, which I know is supposed to be lighthearted and silly, but is dealing with darker topics. It's doing that to engage with those darker topics. And in this particular instance, it is about the city of Ankh-Morpork and a dragon that just decides to install itself as king. And the people who are pushing back against that and trying to be like, wait, no, the dragon can't be king, despite a lot of the citizens of the city going, dragon's king now. I don't know what you want, dragon's king now. So, yeah, I feel like it's going to feel very topical and very relevant. And I just want to sit with those feelings and that, and see these characters dealing with that kind of a situation and how do they find ways to move forward. So that was her last recommendation. So I suspect that's what I'm going to be reading in the coming weeks. I actually set aside a video I was working on. They're supposed to go up, I think, the day that you'll be seeing this, because I just knew that that wasn't, everything in that video was going to be like light and fluffy and silly. It was like a romance and a silly mystery and stuff that was just very not serious, and I just know that that's not what I need right now. I do want to mention, kind of outside of reading, the other things I find myself reaching for are some video games, and specifically Dragon Age 2 and Dragon Age Inquisition, which I think are both about people who are in the wrong place at the right time. They're people who are, again, thrust into a sudden change in the world. In Dragon Age 2, Hawke is a refugee at the start of the game. Their city has been overrun by blight. They have seen people die, and they are fleeing for their lives, and they end up in Kirkwall, and Kirkwall is a terrible place. My friend and I refer to it as the shitty of Kirkwall. It's a place that has just a lot of systemic issues, and Hawke is doing the best they can to try and make some light in a dark place, and I think that that really resonates right now. But also Inquisition, you have a character who becomes like a chosen one, not necessarily because they are the chosen one, but because the people have chosen them as the chosen one. They're again in the wrong place at the right time, and they do everything within their personal power to try and make the world a little bit brighter and fix some of what is going wrong. And I feel like that sentiment, again, just it really resonates for me. And I'm thinking specifically too of a sequence that happens kind of right after the prologue of the game, where your character is stumbling through the snow on mountains, and they're lost and they're injured and they're trying desperately to figure out where the other people have gone from their group, and they keep finding evidence of them, but the people are already gone. They've already gone ahead, and your objective marker is just find a way forward. And your Inquisitor is stumbling and injured and keeps passing out in the snow, blacking out, waking up, having to keep getting up and keep moving on. And there's all these moments where it's like, I guess this is where the Inquisitor dies. And eventually they do find the others. They do find their fellow refugees. Because again, you end up with more characters who are refugees at the start of the game, who are seeking safety in an unsafe world. And that is capped off by a group of people singing The Dawn Will Come, which is a song about no matter how dark things get, there is always a way forward, and the dawn will always come. And I am not going to cry right now, but I feel like that is a really important visual and an important message, and that's the kind of stuff I'm reaching for right now. So, I'm not gonna cry again. I got a lot of it out of my system yesterday. I'm very dehydrated today as a result. I need to go drink some water. So I'm gonna go do that. I'm gonna go drink some water. You should probably drink some water too. And I guess my closing message is just take care of yourself. Do what you need to do to feel like you have some security and control in your life, and connect with people, reach out to people, build your community, take care of yourself, and do what you gotta do. So that is it. And I'm not going to do my normal outro. I just stay safe.